They have this logic of, well, if he talks that way and he was a winner, then I'm trying to play and I'm trying to be good, so I'll talk that way and I'll adopt that mindset. And while the mindset is good, they don't bring with it all the other aspects of it. What they don't realize is that mindset, that philosophy, is the end stage. It's the verbal expression of an actual philosophy of their life, which took place in action, in small decisions that took place every day of their lives, to have a hard practice, to practice with purpose, to give up things to help teammates, to be able to battle, to scout out opponents, to improve your game, to be able to be humble and say, okay, I'm fantastic at this area, but is there a way I can still improve something very basic about my game and tweak up some of the small aspects and plug some of the leaks? And is there an area here where I'm good, but actually I'm good in a way that's abusive? I'm good in a way that's got too many, my risks are too great, and I need to shore up some of my decision making, and I need to be humble and understand that I can be coached by this guy, and I'm not just because I'm the best player, I can't berate this teammate. All the things that went into it, these people haven't studied. They've just heard what's said, and then they're parroting the same things and thinking if they just try, that trying is enough. It's not enough. I mean, I do accept the premise that these people actually believe it themselves, that they really do believe that their goal is to win, and that when they say their only goal is to be the champion, I really think that in their minds they do think that. But I think that's part of the problem. That's become the illusion, where they think to say that and just to do what they do normally, do a little bit extra, is enough. It's not enough if you want to be that guy who can say that and it can be legitimate in reflection of what your actions are and then your accomplishments later in your career. These are the people where they don't do absolutely everything they could do to improve. And yet the person who says, I just want to win, explained like that, or all that matters to me is to be the champion, all I'm doing is trying to be the best, that implies that nothing else matters except to be the best. And yet, does your life reflect that? Does your career reflect that? It doesn't. Because you don't sacrifice the right parts of your game in order to improve, or the right parts of your style that are fun and can be successful in order to be a more successful, more consistent player, more effective, more efficient player. Do you sacrifice aspects of your game in a Counter-Strike or a League of Legends sense, in a team game, to help this teammate succeed in a way where some of your individual glory might be lessened? You'll still be a star player, but you'll help out this supportive player, and in doing so, he'll support you, and that will facilitate you to be the champion, but with maybe less impressive stats, or you won't be just seen as the standout center of attention. Are you willing to do that? Many players are not. When we talk about the topic of the language of the game, both in terms of communication within the game, but also in terms of the notion that the game has a language to, that it is a fabric, that it's kind of a territory, and the way people operate and move around within that and interact with it is a kind of communication, is a kind of interaction between themselves and the landscape, and that there's a poetry, there's a music, there is a language to that in any game, League of Legends, Dota 2, CSGO, whatever it might be. Now, what made me think of this particular topic and the way I framed it is, quite a while ago, I think it was actually my first ever AMA, Ask Me Anything thread on the League of Legends subreddit, someone asked me to make like my all-star team. And I made the all-star team, and I actually picked players from 4 different regions. I had players from Korea, China, Europe, and North America. And obviously the first thing you'd run into, even if it was an all-star type event, is, well, they obviously don't speak the same common language. Like at the time, the players from China and from Korea would have had very poor English. Obviously, the players from Europe and North America could understand each other well. So there wouldn't be any shared language. So I made this point in perhaps a witty, pithy way to state it. But I actually did genuinely mean this, and there was something tangible behind this in terms of a concept, which is, I said, they don't need to speak a common language. Geniuses speak the language of the game with their play. But when we talk about communication between players, because in games like CSGO and League of Legends, these are team games. To me, communication, overt communication, where you actually speak and you express an idea through these ape-like small mouth movements that make tiny vibrations that go through the air and hit your fucking tympanic membrane, your eardrum. When you're talking at that level, that is actually there. My theory has been, that I've crafted, largely to artificially create the kind of team play, the way you play off and interact with each other to battle an opponent through strategy or what you're going to do next, or giving communication to each other, more information from the one person who might have his own perspective to the wider perspective by having their information points. you're trying to artificially create the kind of team play that is actually comparable to what great players who have this feel for the game and express themselves so completely and uniquely actually have together when they have a natural synergy. Just they have an unspoken way of playing off each other where when one does something, the other one just feels like he knows what needs to come next. And when they both play at an excellent level, they seem to vibe in a certain manner that makes them play a fantastic game. Well, there's a great example, a bunch of examples actually from the NBA I could give you of this. Obviously, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James. They don't play positions that naturally interact as much, but they're players where they were fantastic on the fast break. They would nearly all the time complete every alley-oop, every great play off each other. The way they'd know when one should take a shot and when the other. You can't chart that stuff down. There wasn't a set code in place. They weren't always overtly speaking what they were going to do next, but they understood their styles fit together and they meshed them together, and then they learned to understand the communication that's involved with the language of the game as well as actual language and communication overtly, explicitly in words within the game. So here's my sports example to set up both aspects of that. So the all-time great NFL player, quarterback Peyton Manning, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, now the Denver Broncos, who just won the Super Bowl the other day, is a player who for much of his career has been labelled as a choker, being labelled as someone who in the playoffs falls apart in the big game, whether that be the Super Bowl or playoffs in general, because in general he was around like a 50% playoff record for his career, and he was someone who made it to two Super Bowls and fell apart there in the Super Bowls, even though he won one. He was someone who did make it into a lot of matches against teams like the Patriots in playoff matches and lose the big game and have his issues. And there's certainly something to it. It's not that this is ridiculous to label him as a choker. He definitely had times that he choked. You think of when he was in the final against the Seahawks, where he came in with this godlike offense and he threw the pick six against them. He struggled against the Saints when they played in 2009 in the final. But it's not as simplistic as him just being a choker, because you have to ask sometimes, why was he in those situations? The reason why he was in the playoffs pretty much every season is because his team would win double-digit games every single season, not always with fantastic rosters either. He's someone where the championship theory of how you play in the NFL is it's not just about having godlike offense, because that can betray you in the final, in the pressure game. It's about having fantastic defense. Defense wins championships. That's what they always say, right? Yet for so many years, he carried mediocre or just good defenses with the Colts. And it was his offense, this sick offense, and this ability to be almost like the tactical coordinator, but while on the field yourself, that allowed his teams to get into the playoffs with so many good records in the regular season. And then to win games, and to win a Super Bowl, and to make it so far, and to make it so many AFC games, etc. This is a guy where it was so often predicated upon him on the offense to make the good reads and tweak it on the fly that would be able to get them wins where defense wasn't winning them. And so as a result, when they wins one on the way out now with a fantastic defense, not doing much himself, there's almost kind of a poetry to that finally he did have a defense that carried him in that scenario. So let's talk about this issue of composure, because it's so very vital, because it obviously extends beyond just the game itself. Yeah, you're going to see the effects of composure in how you react in the game, but we're talking about the mental aspect of the game. We're talking about the psychological component of the game. So to me, composure means to find some level of comfort, to find some aspect within which you can at least operate and have agency on the game and perform to some degree under varying levels of pressure, because obviously the pressure mounts as you're in bigger tournaments, as you're in bit deeper stages in the tournament, as you're against more difficult opponents or opponents that are always kryptonite to you and often have a good matchup against you. This is where the pressure piles up, or if you've lost a bunch of times and then you get in that scenario again. It's not necessarily, when we talk about composure, just succeeding outright and being incredible. That tends to define the most clutch players, that they always somehow do it and they always come with their best play. I mean, you think of some players, they were fantastic under the most pressure. That's what makes them amazing. So I think, for example, of the player Cypher. Now, in the latter part of Quake Live, like from sort of half of 2010, the latter half of 2010 onwards, this guy was unbelievable in high-pressure games. You put him in a semi-final or a final, he would play even better than his normal level, and then he might even at home in an online cup. If you put him in the fifth game of a best-of-5 series, his level would go even higher. That's why he'd get to fifth games and still win the championship so many times. It's felt like his skills became even more honed under pressure, and the pressure would get to the opponent more than it would to him. I saw a tweet retweeted by someone else, by a guy called Gatsu, Gahtzu, at Gatsu, and he's a German Captain Falco main fighting game player from Super Smash Bros. Melee. And the quote said, "How many times must you lose because of not playing well? before you realize your bias memories of peak performances have misled you. Now, this is a fantastic quote. Has so much within it. It's so evocative. Makes me think of at times myself when I thought of great games I had. I thought, oh, that's how good I could really be. Makes me think of many people I've known. Makes me think of the average kind of consensus and how people talk about themselves and talk up their game and talk up their game knowledge. And even if they can't do it, they think they're better than they are. Now, these people also, and this may be you, tend to show their insecurity and fear of what their true level might be by ignoring the fundamentals of the game. And so they think, oh, well, those are for beginners, and I've learned that, and I'm already better than that. And besides, that's not the reason I'm losing. I'm not losing because of farming. I'm not losing because of aiming in CS. I'm not losing because of positioning. I'm not losing because of weapon control. I'm not losing because of the champions I play. I'm losing because this guy, he got lucky here, or I was doing the right thing up here, and then I made a mistake here. I wouldn't do that next time. They do it this way. And the reason why they do that is because they have this insecurity, they have this fear. And if they actually practice their fundamentals, they find out how bad they are at the very basic concepts of the game. And if they practice them a lot, it'd be hard work, but they might improve, but they know they only improve a tiny bit at a time, gradually. And so they don't want to deny all this. They want to get a lucky win over someone higher ranked than them. They want to have a moment where something goes right and they say, oh, that's my true level. I was feeling good that game, and I had my coffee, and I didn't have any stress because of homework or school or work or whatever. And so, yeah, in that moment, that was my real level, as opposed to the day-to-day. Your day-to-day games is your real level. The odd day when it goes great and you win all 10 games, that's not your real level. Your day-to-day level is your real level. That's why a lot of the MMR functions in games like League of Legends and CSGO actually try to balance your MMR based on your level. So you're winning something like, like 60% of the games. As in, when you have a day where you win all 10 games in a row, unless you've just started on a new Smurf account, that is an extremely unlikely scenario and shouldn't happen based on the MMR. And you got lucky that day probably, or had just a fantastic run, a streak of good games. That's unlikely to continue. The system essentially is designed for it not to continue, and that should be considered the outlier. And then the day when you win the 5 games and you could have won that other one, that's more like your reasonable day. That's your day-to-day. So your day-to-day level is your level. There's no secret real level, true level. It's your day-to-day level. The problem I have with the whole confidence issue is I feel like the way it's most often presented, as though all the rest of what is possible in the game and your success in your career comes once you have confidence. I feel like that's getting the cart before the horse, to use that English idiom. As in, obviously, you need to have the horse pulling the cart, right? Not the cart pulling the horse. So as a result, what's happening here, in my opinion, is people aren't acknowledging that when they don't feel confident, that's actually because they lack a reason to feel confident. Think about that. There's a great quote, by a guy called Jack Ramsey, Dr. Jack Ramsey, and he was a legendary American basketball coach, and he was the coach of the Portland Trailblazers, who won the 1977 NBA title with Bill Walton famously as their MVP type player in that title run. And he had this quote that said, "True self-confidence is constant and won't evaporate under pressure." Now the key point there is that notion that it's constant, as in you don't have to one day be, I'm confident today, I'm not confident next day. And more importantly, when you're in the big match, the one that you might be worried about in other circumstances, the one where you could lose, the one where you're up against everything, if it's true self-confidence, it'll still be present. It won't just evaporate. It won't just disappear. And you won't be like, I wasn't confident, or, we didn't come into the tournament with a lot of confidence. That won't be the case. So as a result, that's true self-confidence. The rest is kind of like just, first of all, like picking and choosing when your game was on and then you say that's confidence, or it's superstition of hoping you can be confident, or blaming things on that. Think about this. It's not as simple as just being confident, because we all know everyone celebrates confidence when you're confident and you win and you dominate the opponent. What they don't bother to talk about is there's plenty of teams that are confident and then play an opponent and they should probably beat the opponent on paper. They've got better players than the opponent. They may even be playing better than the opponent at one point in the game, and they're so confident, and when you know what happens, they lose the game. They get upset, they defeat you in a shocking fashion, they're confident and go into the scenario, yet still they lose the 1v1, still they lose in a certain situation where they were favoured, where things seem to be going so well. In that scenario, no one blames confidence, because everyone's seeking confidence as this magical, like, be-all, end-all solution to everything, that if you feel confident, you're invulnerable and on and knew everything that was going to happen. They never mentioned when they were confident and it went to shit and you got upset and it all went wrong and you were overconfident, or you imagined you knew what was going to happen. They don't mention any of that stuff. So even great teams who in other circumstances are confident can lack confidence against specific opponents. That's another detail to it. Especially if that opponent is dangerous against them. So, a team like Astralis in CSGO. Astralis in CSGO is famous for always rocking group stage, nearly always getting to semi-finals. But in semi-finals and finals, it's not just that they're bad in semis and finals. It's that in semis and finals in Counter-Strike Go, you tend to play about 2 or 3 different teams because they're the best teams in the world and they're who you're going to meet at that point. And those teams, if they're very dangerous for Astralis, such as Envious, for example, they tend to lose to Envious a lot. And you can see they're more afraid then. They're lacking confidence when they play them there, even though they had confidence otherwise. It wasn't just this magical quality that came out of them and the way their mind is and belief and all this stuff. I love my teammates and all that sort of tertiary bullshit, which may be a part of when you are feeling confident, how you think about it and how you connect it and the extra feelings that come wrong, the corollaries, but it's not the cause of it. It's not the main thing you should be focusing on.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadjou, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel. Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.